In this episode, I sit down with Mildred J. Mills. She's a retired IT executive turned memoirist and speaker, and we have a raw, deeply moving conversation about what it really means to rise. Mildred opens up about her early years growing up as the third of 17 children on a farm in Alabama and how those roots shaped her grit, faith, and drive. She takes us behind the scenes of her memoir, Daddy's House, sharing the powerful truths behind her story of survival, from family trauma and discrimination to the corporate glass ceiling. We really had a conversation that unpacked the realities of race, resilience, identity, and why it's never too late to rewrite your story. This episode is an emotional masterclass on choosing forgiveness over bitterness and harmony over hustle.
What I'm really interested in, we're kind of in trying times in the world for a lot of people, and I think you've got a really great perspective that will help educate me and people that are listening to this. And I do want to talk about your book and everything that you've been through and the position you're taking in life and the power you have. So, I think it's interesting when, we all have traumatic experiences, but you have particularly traumatic experiences, in my opinion. So what did it take for you to sit down and write your book and really go through, like, I guess, relive all these stories? Like, what did it take for you as a person to be able to do that, and why would you do that to begin with?
It took a lot of courage, I must say. And the reason I did it was to heal myself initially. And then as I continued to write and tell people about my story, there were people who said that asked me to read that book or to write that book so that they themselves could heal. They thought that others would heal as a result of hearing my story about some of the traumatic issues that happened in my life. And to be clear, there were traumatic things, but there were also wonderful things that happened in my life that, are extraordinary. And like, for instance, how many people win a beauty pageant? How many people win Miss Talent for singing, and not just locally, but nationally? So, just writing those things down and thinking about them, I thought, for more than 50 years, I thought there was absolutely nothing interesting about my life. And then I worked or I volunteered at a women's shelter for about 2 years. And oh my God, the stories that I heard and the pain that I saw in these women's lives. And they so looked forward to me coming in every day, or I probably volunteered 3 times a week. And they so looked forward to me coming in, and they said things like, I can't wait to sit and talk to you because you listen and you can understand. And I thought, hmm. And shortly after that, after a couple years, I thought, I'm going to go talk to my mother because I grew up in a house of domestic violence. And my mother was, the recipient of a lot of that. So I decided I'm going to go and talk to my mother and just ask her some questions about, why did she stay in such a relationship? And, after the first time she was hit, why did she continue to be hit? And so I sat there with my mom and I expected her to say she wouldn't talk to me, but she decided to give me an interview. I said, let's pretend I'm Oprah Winfrey and you're on my show. And so she softened and she said, just give me a little cup of wine. And it was like noon or something like that. And I thought, I didn't know you drank wine. She said, there are a number of things you don't know about your mama. But anyway, so we sat and we talked for about 4 hours. And I recorded her voice and I asked her every questions I didn't even know I wanted to know the answer to. Like, I wanted to know her from the time she was a little girl. And I wanted to know, what was that like? I said, you were probably spoiled because she was the youngest of 10. And she quickly said, oh, no, I wasn't. And she talked about how her mom raised her and how hard her mother worked to raise her children. My mother was the youngest of 10. And so she said, I just didn't want to work that hard by myself. And to her credit, she gave honor and credit to my father for the good. He was a provider. He was a heck of a provider. He farmed and he raised every bit of the food that we ate. He raised cattle. He raised pigs. We had all of our gardens. I mean, we had organic before it was a thing, you know? So I still love to cook fresh food. I don't buy stuff in cans and boxes and all that kind of thing. And I still truly enjoy cooking and preparing fresh food for my family. But I decided to write the book, like I said, to heal myself and to heal others. And I have, if you ever read any of the reviews on Amazon, that book is doing exactly what I set out to do with it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. The book is called Daddy's House, and it is it can be tough to relive, but what I hear, and this is something that I find that I think I was drawn to you from the beginning, is instead of looking back at these traumatic experiences that happened to you, you still approach this situation like, but here's the good I got out of it. I still love to cook good food. My father, yes, he was abusive, but he was also a provider, and so there seems to be equal blame for the trauma and the survival and the good things that he brought to the table. How do you get to that point? Because I think so many people, myself included, it's very easy to be the victim of the situation and not see the good. So how do you see the good and all these things that have happened to you?
I have to say that I have to give my mother a lot of credit for that. And then I think there's something just internal also. I get up every day pretty joyful. And I see the good in life. My mother was a person that you wouldn't know by looking at her as she walked outside of the house that she could have been beaten on that day or, you know, going to church or whatever, sitting there with a smile on her face. She just seemed to have had this inner peace. And I am her namesake. So I'm not, I just, I don't have time or the energy to be angry and to be a victim. And I think that I know that everything that happens to me in my life is a lesson. And when you go to school and you sit in the classroom, you're supposed to learn something when you're taught lessons, right? You're
Mhm.
not supposed to sit there and think, well, I'm not going to learn that because it doesn't make sense to me. If you went to college, I went to college, and you wonder, why do they teach us these things that we're never going to use in life? Well, it's a lesson. And somewhere along the journey, you might learn something from that. But I just find that to when things happen to you, you can sit there and be a victim, or you can say, well, I'll never let that happen again. You know, I won't put myself in that position again. And there's some things that you can't control. But then those things that you can control, like for instance, I'll talk about one horrendous thing that happened to me at age 19. I was gang raped, and I was actually standing on the corner of Broad and High Street in Columbus, Ohio, on my way home from work. And a person that I didn't know, I mean, I had seen this person. I was also a model. That's how I earned extra money while I was in technical school to help me get through that school. And this guy would be sitting in the audience. I saw him on more than one occasion. He would always stay around and say, "Oh, you were good tonight." And I just said, "Thank you," you know, whatever. Never knew his name or whatever. And this guy ends up at the bus stop driving this fancy car, which didn't matter because I was so happy to be at that bus stop and not in a cotton field because I grew up picking cotton. And this
Mhm.
guy, he's trying to talk me into his car, and I feel some kind of way. I'm thinking, well, I don't know this guy. But then he's sitting in a bus zone, and these people are angry with him. Get your butt moving. I mean, they say, girl, get in that car with your boyfriend. I don't know this guy. He's not my boyfriend. So out of fear, eventually I get into this car, and just awful things happened after that. But I was so happy at the end of this event not to be physically, I mean, just broken arms, beaten up, killed. I mean, I thought it just, it's hard to explain that I felt blessed not to have been harmed more than I was. So, and I actually prayed and asked God to help me forget that. And I honestly, I lost that memory for more than 30 years. And it was while writing this book, actually, I was writing a letter to my daughter that this memory came back. I was talking to her about, well, I've been your age before. I haven't always been your mother. I was a little girl once. I was a teenager. I had these feelings and I had these things in my mind thinking that my parents were not the smartest people in the world. But guess what? The older I get, the more I appreciate my parents and the life that they gave me and the way that they raised me. So I was sitting there writing this letter to her, and I said, you know, at this age I did this and all these things. And this memory came flooding back like a hurricane, and it just about knocked me over. But like I said, I find things that happen to you, you learn a lesson, or at least I do. I find a lesson in almost everything that happens to me in life, whether it's good or whether it's bad. You know, and people that cross my path, I learned something from those folks. I learned, like for you, I'd like to have a future relationship with you in whatever that is, if it's business or whatever. But and then there are people you meet and you think, yeah, it's really nice to meet you. And you think, I don't ever want to see you or talk to you again, you know, for whatever reason, but you don't say these things. I treat each person with kindness and with respect, or at least I try my best to, unless they give me reason not to.
Wow. Um, that hits me in the heart. You know, I'm a dad, yeah, and I hear the things that you went through, and I can't even imagine. You know, was there? You know, you're the third of 17 children,
I am.
right? So which
So
is
get a load of that, right?
yeah, yeah, and so you know, I'm an older sibling, not just one brother I have, but what do you think there was an element of protecting the younger people in your household from even at that age, even at 19, where you're going through this horrific thing and choosing to block it out or asking God to block it out? Was there an element of I got to protect the younger people in my house?
I think it was an element of I've got to protect myself because how
Yeah,
do you go through that? I mean,
yeah.
um, the honest to goodness, the thing that crossed my mind more than anything was, first of all, I'm at the corner trying to get home from work.
Mhm.
And during those times, there were the mini skirts and, all this. Well, they were dressed just as provocatively today, but why is a woman judged by what she is wearing, not a man? You wear a mini dress or you wear whatever this thing is, but I was dressed professionally, and this person had seen me on the modeling runway. I wear bathing suits, I wear the mini skirt or whatever, but I know that I was trying to protect myself because I thought and I knew in my heart, all these things are racing through my mind as this is happening. I said, who's going to believe me? What person, what police person, what family member, who is going to believe me? And this is 1970, and things are even worse then than they are now. At least there is the Me Too movement and all these things where but women have been being raped all their lives. And I'm talking about figuratively and physically, So and I'm a young Black girl, um, and we as Black women have been especially raped. Think about Black women as slaves and Black women as, I mean, and I'm not trying to victimize Black women or anybody else, but if you really take the blinders off, you see that we have been that person that can be kicked around and not believed. And people seem to try to find a reason not to believe you rather than to believe you. So,
Mhm.
I've experienced those things, but I've never allowed those things to keep me from knowing my worth, knowing my value, and knowing that I am a hardworking, I'm an amazing person. Just ask me.
I agree with
So
that, 100%. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so to answer your question, I really think I was trying to protect myself, and trying to protect because you can lose your mind, I think, over something like that. There are people who don't get over such things. I mean, they
yes.
just find they get they no longer trust men, period. They don't trust people around them, and they just don't trust the world around them. So there's that part of me, as I said much earlier, that I just believe there is some good in everybody. And I don't want to be a fearful person and walking through. I mean, even in our political climate today, I choose to believe I know that we will get through this and all things, and I oftentimes say to people who talk about how rough it, I said, hey, my generation, my people came through slavery. We got through that. We came through a revolutionary war. This country is resilient. We are resilient people, and we just rise above this stuff. And you can sit there and look at television all day long and think about how horrible things are, or you can turn that thing off and go find something positive to focus on, which is what I
Mhm.
choose to do.
I love that. I love that. I think that's an important reminder, if you zoom out and look at your life and look at all the things you've done, some things that you've chosen to do, some things that you've had to do, it almost looks like it's for people. It looks like it's not one person that has lived all these experiences, from picking cotton to being a model, to being an executive, to now an author and speaker, empowering women across the world, sharing your story, raising your own family. Like if you really look at it, like one of those things is enough, but to do all of those things in one lifetime it is pretty remarkable. And that's why I agree with you when you say I'm amazing. You know, how does all of that play into the strength you need to bring to the table today? You're inspiring a ton of not just women, but people like me that can't possibly relate to some of the things you've been through because of my circumstances, but have a deep desire to want to learn how we improve from this day forward. So what is the most important thing from you from your past that you pull from to help you accomplish that?
The most important thing to me from my past, I think, is growing up on that farm. And I know that at age 18, when I left there, my parents, to their credit, had given me everything I needed in order to survive in life. I knew how to work hard. I was resilient. I mean, sheesh, you got a good beating for many, many things. Some perhaps you might have deserved them. Now, my mom, when she hit you, you kind of thought, yeah, I probably deserve that. And she sat there. The thing that I thought I'd sit there and watch her with her little, she said, go out there and get me a switch. So you go get the switch and you try to get the smallest one you can find.
Mhm.
And she sits there before she hits you and she says, now this is going to hurt me as much as it's more it's going to hurt you. And I thought she really must be insane because if it hurts you so bad, why are you doing this? And
Right.
of course, and I knew that it wasn't going to last long. And but um, I just think that living that life of knowing that there are consequences for actions, and knowing
Mhm.
that I can do all things. If you put your mind to it and you work hard, you can survive. I mean, I think that my upbringing was the most critical part of my life. It taught me how to be in any place. My father, to his credit, taught me that I could be anything that I wanted to be. And it didn't matter whether it was what you thought was a man's job or a woman's job, and he taught me these things. Well, I don't know if he even knew that he was teaching me these things because he never said the words. He gave
Mhm.
me opportunities when I was growing up. Like at 5, 6 years old, I'm his bookkeeper on a milk route where we sell produce from the farm. And then later on, I am the bookkeeper for the cotton farm. So he teach, and then helps me. I have to sit in April every year and help him do his income taxes. All these things that are mathematical kind of things. So that's why probably at age 18, I am learning how to program computer boards. And who knows anything about computers in 1969 or 1970? Not very many people. I hadn't heard about it either until I went to school for that. But yeah, that just that upbringing was something that I'll never forget. And I can look upon every day to help me move through life, help me journey through this place that we call life.
Wow. Wow. I don't know many people that can have that perspective. So what, where they look at trauma in a sense, and especially primarily your father, where he's got he kind of hits both ends of the spectrum, where he did some really bad things, but you also give him credit for doing some what you would consider really good things that really helped you out in life.
I do. In fact, when people read my book and they see that he drove me to that technical school in Ohio from Alabama, when
Mhm.
I was the person he relied upon a lot for many, many things, like I got up and cooked breakfast in the morning every day.
Mhm.
I picked more cotton than he expected me to pick more cotton than anybody else. And I got up in the middle of the night to take care of children. But I remember the day before that he was going to drive me to that school, he said, "Well, who do you expect for us to teach how to do all those things we've taught you to do?" And I thought to myself, that's just not my problem. But I said, "Well, I don't know." And of course, I hung my head, which is, that's well, one of those things. You didn't stand there staring my father straight in the eye. And I thought to myself, please God, he said, well, I'm going to talk to Mama tonight and see if this is the right thing to do. And I thought to myself, I sure hope you make the right decision, because one way or the other, I'm out of here. I mean, I thought, I've given you my 18 years and I'm getting off this farm and I'm
Yeah.
not coming back. So, and then I think about him driving me to that school and paying my tuition in full. And he paid, it was $500, which is a whole lot of money in 1969 for a
Mhm.
farmer. And I'm sure that that was probably as much as he made in a year. So, um, how in the world can I be upset about that? I mean,
Wow.
just honestly. And then I
Wow.
also think about some of those Friday nights when we played games like Chinese checkers and bingo and all these things. So it didn't happen all the time or whatever, but sometimes we did these things. And I have those memories, and I have all these brothers and sisters. And growing up, I didn't have external friends because when was I ever going to go spend the night with somebody or somebody? My parents were very protective. And I think
Mhm.
that they did an amazing job of protecting us from a lot of things that were going on back in the 1950s and 60s. I never saw a whites only sign or one of those fountains where, only white folks could drink from those. We lived on a 60-acre farm and down a dead-end road, and my parents went to town. We didn't go to those places. We didn't have a television in my home until I was 16 years old, and
Wow.
didn't have a telephone either.
Mhm.
So, there wasn't much influence from the outside world in so you got to use your mind to be creative, and you've got all these brothers and sisters to play with and to work side by side and to commiserate with about, oh my gosh, that was pretty rough, wasn't it? Or whatever. So, it's I had the opportunity to attend a book event recently in Melbourne, Florida. And in one of those meetings was a judge, and she was a family court judge. And she said to me, there was a lot of violence or domestic violence in your home. She said, did the authorities ever intervene? And I said, I had to kind of think, and I laughed. I said, I might have sold tickets for the authorities to intervene in my father's house. You know, I might pay,
Right.
because he, and she said, well, today they would call that abuse. She said, so what is your perspective on how that should have handled, or the way things happened in your house? I said, I've never thought about it, but when you ask that question, I have to think about I had only two people to look at every day at the beginning when I got up in the morning and before I went to bed at night. And I got my guidance from those two people. And whether they thought it was right, or I'm sure they did the best that they could. I said there was discipline, there was structure. Knew right from wrong. We were fed every day. I've never been hungry a day in my life. I was cold because, we had this fireplace or we had um, wood burning stoves or whatever. But, and I said, not only that, when I think about the government interfering in some of these homes, sometimes they really do need to. But if there's a functioning family, I mean, and these kids are not in trouble, et cetera, et cetera, I said, how do you compare the success of my parents in raising 16 kids to adulthood? A baby died at 8 months old of pneumonia. But they raised these people to adulthood. Everyone is successful in his or her own right. And right now, many of us are retired and nobody's begging bread. Everybody has kind of done his or her own thing. And there are different levels of success. I said, but what happens to these kids to go to foster homes? What kind of life do they have? What kind of what kind of life do they have? I've heard of such horrible abuses, and I'm not just talking about a good beating every now and then. I mean, just horrendous things, mental illnesses, and all these things. And at the end of that talk, that judge said to me, "You've given me a lot to think about. I've never thought about it from that perspective." So I think that we have to take things and not just look at things aren't just black and white. There, there's a lot of gray in almost every situation. So, what can I say?
Yeah. That I would agree with the judge. Like, you've given me a lot to think about. This is a new perspective, and I know that faith and forgiveness play a big role in your writing the book to begin with. You had to get to a level of forgiveness on some way to even rehash some of the stories that you went through. And how do you think that the young people today? I'm raising a son, and I'm trying to raise him with some awareness, with some empathy, with some kindness, with some faith. I'm trying my best to raise him, which can be because of the influences from the outside world. And when you were telling me about your house on a 60-acre farm with no TV and no phone, I thought, oh man, that sounds lovely. Please, I want more of that today.
I
Uh,
know.
but it's not the world we live in. So what is, to parents and young people out there for today, because you're very much in tune with the way the world works today, with so much outside influence, is there any advice you would give us to kind of adopt some of the philosophies and mentalities that you have?
One of the things that I remember raising my children and thinking, I wish I had a 60-acre farm or just a 1-acre farm to put them on so that they can learn the value of hard work and the value of having to give of yourself in order to feed yourself. And I think that the advice that I would give to parents today, of course, I'll tell you another thing. As I was growing up, I mean, as I was raising my children, and they had these complaints about mom being tough and blah blah blah, I said, I'm doing the best I can. And I said, but if my parenting isn't good enough, I pray and hope that God will bless you with those. When you have those children of your own, I hope that He will bless you to be the perfect parent that I'm not. So I think that we should give ourselves grace as parents. We do the absolute best that we can. We're so joyous when that woman is pregnant and, this child, we're expecting this child, and then they come in the world and they cry half the night and all these things. And you think, oh Lord, why was I praying and hoping for this child? And then you might have one that's just a wayward child, a willful child, and you think, what did I do to deserve this? You didn't do anything. Children are born with free will. And you know, I have grandchildren that are certainly older than your children, and they often ask me for advice on various things. But I would just say, Kevin, um, parenting is hard. It's really hard. And I think faith over fear. Like sometimes parents, I think children sit there and watch television and they're scared to death of maybe a white child is terrified of black kids because somebody has told them that these are bad people, and maybe black kids are terrified of white kids because or white policemen and all these people. But you have to have faith over this fear. And I think that to for parents to be honest with their children and allow their children to be in different environments. I wouldn't take my kids to certain environments. I don't care who lives there, but to at least have a conversation about the reality of life and living with different people. And I think to expose our kids to different environments it's a responsibility. I don't think that we bring them up in just a homogenized kind of environment where they only see certain types of people and they only know about their life, whatever that life is, whether they're living in poverty or whether they're living in wealth. I think to just exposure to different things and different people it's something that we need to do.
Hmm. That's powerful. Because I do see the opposite of that sometimes, where people are hiding in their bubble of people that look just like them, talk just like them,
Yep.
believe the same things they believe, and they're not getting out. And I can look at your life now and say, well, that's you did that. You grew up on the farm, but then you went out into the world and experienced a bunch of different things.
I did, Kevin, and if I may say one other thing, when I
Sure.
was 16 years old, of course, I lived in the era of segregation. And when I was 16 years old, the integration had started to be a thing. And my father, to his credit, someone, I think, in the education system asked him to send us to help integrate the schools in Wetumpka, Alabama. And he talked to us about it, but I knew I didn't have a voice in that. I thought, why is he asking me? Because he's already made up his mind that he's going to send us there. And he
Mhm.
did. And he said, these people asked me to send you guys to that school because they know there will be no trouble from my kids. And, he was well respected in the community. My father he minded his own business. He took care of his family. He took care of his own. And I don't care. People knew that they weren't going to mess with my father. He didn't bother anybody outside that home. And so he exposed us to a lot, and I exposed my children to various different kinds of environment, not just the environment, not my bubble, but, and I said to my son when he asked me, why do I have to go to this school? He went to a very privileged kind of high school from sixth grade on. And he said, when he got ready to go to college, he said, he went to the University of Michigan. He said, I'm going to a school where I'm never going to be the only black child in a classroom. And, even though he was the only there were other black kids in that school, but not very many.
Mhm.
But, you don't know what your children feel unless you allow them the space to talk to you and explain to you how they feel. And I felt that was I was kind of shocked by that answer, by I thought I didn't know you felt that way about attending this school. But obviously he did. So he said, I'm going where I know they want me there. And that's when University of Michigan still was doing whatever that program is where they allowed different races and all these different people to, what was it called? You know what I'm talking about, where,
Okay.
but anyway, yeah, he wanted to go to the University of Michigan because he thought they wanted all kinds of people there. And he did exceedingly well there.
That's beautiful. And that was learned. That was a learned psychology. That's beautiful. Mildred Mills, the author of Daddy's House, amazing life journey from farmer to model to executive, and now author and an inspiration to us all. I would say that you were able to adopt a being and a mindset and a faith long before it was hit, long before it was popular. It was really born out of necessity in many, many ways. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I got a feeling this is not the last time you and I'll be on this show talking about what's going on as you impact people in the world. Just thank you for you. I think the biggest thing that I took from this talk was anyone in my life, I need to blame them for the good as along with the bad. If they do anything negative to me, I also need to find the good that they've done and blame them for that as well.
Yes.
And that's powerful.
I think there should be a lesson in everything that crosses your path. And if I may say, the title of the book is Daddy's House, A Daughter's Memoir of Setbacks, Triumphs, and Rising Above Her Roots. But I call it Daddy's House. And I am Mildred J. Mills. And I also have a podcast, My Cotton Patch Moment.
I love that. I love that. So all of that will be in the show notes. You buy the book, get on the podcast, connect with her. What's the best platform to connect with you on?
I use Facebook and LinkedIn, and I am Mildred J. Mills on those platforms, and also Instagram.
So we'll link all that in the show notes. So connect with Mildred J. Mills on her book, Daddy's House, and connect with her on life and inspire the people around you to think the way that she thinks. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. And
Thank
this
you
is
for
Kevin.
having me.
Of course, anytime. This is Kevin with Hustle to Harmony.